So if you're watching this video, odds are you're a giant audio nerd like I am, which means you like to buy stuff. Now, usually we go for the brand new, shiny, top-of-the-line thing because we think it's gonna make us a better producer, a better songwriter, and at the end of the day, our end goal is just to make more music. So if we step back and look at what we need for our workflow, there's a bunch of stuff on the market used that you can get pretty good deals on, and it will help you become more creative and increase your productivity, and it won't break your bank. So in this video, I want to talk about 3 pieces of gear that I've picked up over the last couple of months used, pretty cheap, and they've increased my workflow quite a bit. Now, I'm hoping that these will give you some ideas to look around and see what you can find on the used market for pretty cheap, and make sure you stick around to the end of the video because number 3 was only 40 bucks, and we're going to go into Ableton and Bitwig and see how we can get the most creative use out of number 3 on the list. So the first thing on the list of cheap stuff that I wish I would have bought earlier is the B word. That's right, Behringer. Now, love him or hate him, that's not the point of this video. I'm talking about the X-Touch 1, which is a DAW controller. Now, if you're used to working on a laptop, clicking around, or even using key commands, there's something really magical about having physical, tactile, hands-on control. Now, I learned music production in a studio that had a big board and you could touch things, turn dials, and twist knobs, and it was really exciting. It made you feel like you were operating this big creative machine. And now that the industry has kind of shifted over into a lot of laptop production, I think a lot of people miss out on the feeling of what it's like just to have something physically that you can reach out, touch, and control. Now, I got this guy for 120 bucks. Now, one thing on that 120 bucks is the sides have been removed and the guy lost them. They were nowhere to be found and it didn't have a power adapter. So 10 bucks, found a power adapter, ended up not getting any sides because I think it looks better without it. And this thing is just a joy to work with, especially when it comes to working in sessions where you're tracking a lot of vocals or tracking a lot of instruments and you want the ability to fly around and keep recording, doing more takes and more takes and more takes. Now, checking this out, it kind of has your standard feature set of what a hands-on DAW controller has. A big chunky jog wheel at the bottom for navigating around your session, transport control above that, the ability to select different tracks, different banks, some core feature buttons, including turning on your click, soloing the track. Above that, you do have some F buttons that you can customize the functionality of depending on what software you're on, and then some more core function buttons on the top, solo, mute, select. Now, to the left of that, you have a motorized fader, which allows you to quickly draw in automation or adjust the volume of whatever track you're on. And above that, an encoder knob that allows you to do panning. Now, I'll be honest, this isn't a very exciting piece of equipment. It just kind of sits on the desk and does its job of what it's supposed to do. But once you get the muscle memory down, the speed that you can navigate around the session and the functionality on here really kind of puts you in more of a creative mindset. For me personally, it makes me feel like I'm working on a bigger board, even though I only have one little fader here and a basic transport and some basic functions. It does give me that feeling that I'm operating a big creative machine and not just being a computer programmer putting stuff on the screen with the mouse and the keyboard. So this isn't the only option. Have a look around. There's also things like the fader port by Presonus and some fancier ones by SSL. But if you can find a really good deal on these and have never used one before, pick one up. Spend the time just to get your hand used to it and learning it, and I think you'll find that it really gives you a new kind of vibe in your studio if you're typically used to doing things 100% on your laptop. All right, now moving on to item number 2 on the list of somewhat cheap shit that I wish I would have bought a long time ago is the Apogee Hype Mic. Now, this guy's been out for a while, and if you're not familiar with what it is, it's probably the smallest condenser mic with an actual analog compressor inside of it. So this is actually a full-on sound card with a headphone, USB connection to the computer, and the ability to have an analog compressor tracking in your vocals, which means it's gonna help reduce your clipping, and it's also gonna give you a little bit more control of the dynamics while you're bringing your vocal into your session. I got this for 140 bucks. I looked on Reverb, there's not a lot of ones used for sale. There's some that are around 180. I got this for 140. It didn't come with any of the accessories. It didn't come with the case, the stand, but for 140 bucks, I'm extremely happy with this. Now, I end up using this a lot of the time for tracking in demo vocals. And a new song, link in the description down below, we actually ended up using a lot of the demo session vocals from this mic right here. Now, the final vocal vocals were done with a TLM 103, but listening back to the demo session, there was just something in the verse that we couldn't recreate while we were doing the final vocals. It just had a swag and a magic to it. So I said, screw it, this thing sounds amazing. We're gonna throw the demo session for that verse into the final mix. And check out the link down below. The artist is Michaela Monet, happens to be my wife, amazing artist. And let me know in the comments down below if you can hear the difference of what verse was using this Apogee Hype Mic or what verse was using the TLM 103. Now, to make sure that you make the right decision on if this is a little microphone that's right for you and your scenario, let's take a look at how easy it is to set up the microphone and all the features that you have with just these few controls on the front panel. Now, it's super easy to get the Hype Mic connected and working with your computer. It's a single micro USB cable, and you can get these cables that connect anywhere from a standard USB, a USB-C, or a lightning port, depending on what you want to connect it into. Then once it's connected to the computer, we simply plug in our headphones right here on the headphone port, and we are all set up and ready to start recording. Now that the microphone is connected to the computer, let's take a look at the front of it and some of the key features that really make it unique. At the very top, we see we have an LED meter. So as we're feeding it a signal, we can see the signal, and if we turn up the gain, which is the main knob on the bottom, we can see when we actually get into the red and start clipping. Now, the knob at the bottom isn't just for the gain, it's also what activates our different levels of compression. So right now we have no compression going on. We click this once, we're gonna see a single light on the left. Now we have our first stage of compression, our second stage of compression, and our third stage, very heavy compression now on the signal. Then moving up from the knob, we have our direct monitoring button. By default, we're gonna be hearing the full signal from the microphone. Clicking it in once will put the light in the center, meaning we're getting a 50-50 blend between the dry signal from the microphone and the playback coming in from the computer. Then clicking one more time, bringing the light all the way over to the right is going to activate only hearing the computer playback. So when I'm using this on the road as an audio interface, I'm going to be using the direct signal from the computer most of the time. Then when we get into recording a voiceover, I'm gonna click it, go over to the left, hearing only the microphone signal. And then if we're recording some sort of vocal that requires a mixture of the dry signal from the microphone and the computer playback, that's when we're gonna activate that center setting, allowing us to hear both of those signals mixed together. So as you can see, there's a lot of value in this little guy right here. Not only the analog compressor, but the ability to use it as a sound card, and also the direct monitoring that you can activate with the button in the front. On top of that, if you haven't checked out the track down below, check them out and let me know what you think about that audio quality, because for something this small, this portable, and if you look around long enough, this cheap, I think it is an insanely good investment to have in your arsenal of microphones. Now, number 3 on the list of cheap shit that I wish I would have bought earlier, I got this for 40 bucks. Now, it's not that much brand new. It's only $100 brand new, but this thing was still in the box, brand new when I got it off of Facebook Marketplace for $40. And I'm talking about the MPC Mini3. Now, you look at this and you think this is just kind of your standard throw it in the backpack MIDI controller because it has keys and it has pads and it has a bunch of knobs. But if we take a look deeper into this, there's actually a lot more functionality that you can get out of this, because on top of having the pads and 2 banks to equal 16 pads, we can go through and go to CC and program change, which gives us 2 more layers of 16 buttons that we can freely assign to things. So to explore how we can actually get the most out of this in both Ableton and Bitwig, let's jump over to the computer and check out a couple of creative scenarios that we can use in both of these programs. So when we first just look at the MPC Mini3, we just see that we have 8 knobs, 8 pads, and 2 banks of pads. But if we go right over to the right of that, we have CC and program change. So looking at the editor here, we can see that on every single pad, we can add an independent CC value and then also an independent program change, and we have 2 banks of those. So on top of the 16 pads we have for triggering notes, we also have 32 pads that, depending on the software you're using, can be freely assigned to execute other commands. Now here we are inside of Ableton, and let's take a look at some creative ways that we can actually map some of these extra controls that we have on the MPC Mini3. Now inside of Ableton, I tend to stay away from the program change because that can change the preset on some of the synths inside of your session. So I typically don't use the program change inside of Ableton. However, the CC can come in very handy. So if we take a look at the bottom here on this techno track that we're working on, we have on the master channel a couple of effects. We have an auto filter, a reverb, and a phaser. And we're gonna go ahead and assign these 3 buttons to activate those effects. Now, since these are CC values, as soon as we press and hold it down, it's going to activate them, but then when we release it, it's going to deactivate them. And that can be handy for just toggling on and off effects in a creative way. So let's hit Command M and go ahead and map the auto filter to this value. Let's go ahead and map the reverb to this right here. And then we're gonna map the phaser to this right here. Command M again to get out of MIDI mapping. And then when we press and hold them, we can see that they're activated while we're holding it. As soon as we let go, they deactivate. And now we can actually use this mapping in a very creative way to turn our controller more into a performance instrument. So let's take a look at the buildup of this track going into the breakdown. So while we're getting closer to the breakdown, I'm gonna start off just by cutting the low out first. Then we'll add a reverb and a little bit of flanger. So let's cut that low. And now let's put it into some reverb here. And right before the breakdown, let's go ahead and add the flanger. And that's just using these 3 on the lower. We do have access to all 16 of these, so they're really handled to toggle things on and off, and you can freely assign these to anything in your session and hopefully use the MPK Mini3 more of a fun performance tool than just always using it as a production tool. So here we are inside of Bitwig, where I feel I can actually truly get the most out of the MPK Mini3, and that's largely due to the scripting by a gentleman who releases stuff under the name Driven by Moss. Now, Driven by Moss has profiles for many of the very popular MIDI controllers out there that are already pre-mapped to basically turn anything into the equivalent of a push controller. But in this situation, I'm using a generic Flexi Driven by Moss, and it's connected to the MPK Mini3. What this allows me to do is have up to 300 slots where any incoming information from the MPK Mini3 can be sent to do pretty much anything inside of Bitwig. So if we take a quick look here at my diagram, you can kind of get an overview of how I pre-thought out things to map it. But let's take a look at how that actually works inside of Bitwig. So on the standard setup, the bank and the keys are just going to trigger notes as they normally would. However, when I come over and I hit CC, this is going to turn the MPK Mini3 into device mode. By hitting the upper right here, you can see on the screen, we just turned it into device mode. And now if we take a look at the bottom of the screen, the 8 knobs here are going to control the 8 macros on the screen. And if I have multiple pages on this instrument, these buttons here will switch in between those pages. So now I'm inside of my oscillator mix. I can go back to my main page, and then these right here will switch in between the devices. Now I'm over controlling the EQ right here, being able to sweep the high and sweep the low. And I can go to the next page and then back to the other page, back to the previous device. So there inside of device mode, I have control over all the parameters of my devices and the ability to shift focus on those. But I still have access to all these 3 up here, as well as another bank of 8 up here. So on the bank A, these 3 are focused on the arrange view. So in the arrange, I have the ability to activate record. I can then stop my recording, and if I want to undo that, this is mapped to undo. Then if I'm working over here in the clip view, I can switch over to my upper bank B, and I have very similar features. Let's say on this clip right here, this is going to activate my recording of the clip, as well as stop the clip and start looping it. I can stop playback, I can also undo, and if I want to then go on to the next idea, I can quickly jump over to the next clip and the next clip and just keep recording in real time. Now below that, I have the ability to toggle on the automation writing, the overdub, and then also jump in between my different tracks, and the clip selection follows. So just in the CC here, I have the ability to control the device parameters, record in real time, and then also navigate through my arrange and my clip section. Now that's just the device profile. If I come over here and hit program change and then hit the upper right, it's going to then flip focus into track mode. So by default now inside of track mode, these 8 knobs have different functions. The first one is going to control the volume of the track. Then I'm going to control the panning, and then I have up to 6 sends that I can use right here on the track. Then I have the ability to map out all the remainder of bank A and bank B to execute any other functions that I want that can be found inside of the Flexi by Driven by Moss. And as you can see in some of these menus, every single parameter and every single function inside of Bitwig is pretty much accessible to be mapped to any sort of controller. That's why I feel that inside of Bitwig, you can actually get the absolute most out of the MPK Mini3 right here. So what do you think? Was it worth 40 bucks to have something this small and portable that can act essentially as a full DAW controller that I can throw inside of a backpack? I mean, I'm pretty stoked to have this. I bring it with me everywhere I go. And in a future video, we're gonna talk about any of the updates we did to the track view inside of Bitwig and how we were able to maximize and get the most out of something this small. Now, if you made it this far in the video, leave a comment down below and let me know what was the best cheap purchase that you got and how that's helped you improve your workflow and your creativity. I'm gonna keep my eye out there and keep researching and see if there's other cheap things that we can get and bring into our studio that helps bring more benefit than it does cost. And in future videos, I'll let you know because I think we're gonna do a series on cheap shit I wish I would have bought sooner. Now, my name's Stu. This is Create, Educate, and Inspire. And as we sign off always on our videos, thank you for your time. Thank you for your attention. Go find some cheap pieces of gear that's not gonna break your bank, but is gonna increase your productivity and your final product, and go make something cool.